Welcome to Genesis Global Radio, the origin of information. And now here's your host, Christine Larkin.
Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Genesis Global Radio, the origin of information. I'm your host, Christine Larkin. On today's segment, we'll be speaking with Kimberly Berg, male feminist artist, creator of the website IsisRising.net. He is the founder of what he calls modern Paleolithic art. He is interested in drawing attention to the prehistorical, pre-patriarchal period in human evolution. It was a time when women played a very important role in creating a civilization built on female values. They were social values based on respect for women, on a peaceful community free of war and bloodshed, on compassion for others, on a lifestyle lived in harmony with nature, and in a spirituality that permeated every facet of their daily life. I'd like to welcome once again Kimberly Berg. Kimberly, how are you?
Thank you. I'm very well, and I appreciate you inviting me here.
Well, we love having you. We had a segment at another time, and today you're back. So, Kim, how can we know how people lived in prehistoric times when there were no written records?
Well, actually, we can learn quite a bit. These days, when a archaeological dig is taking place, it's not performed just by one university anthropologists. A whole team of scientists are usually involved, including anthropologists, archaeologists, paleontologists, zoologists, climatologists, botanists. They're all gathered together at the same site collecting information. And in that way, we have a much broader concept of each dig, even though there's no written records to record anything that was happening during this time period.
Mm-hmm. And what years are we talking in this time period?
Well, we're talking about Paleolithic and Neolithic sites.
Mm-hmm.
Paleolithic goes all the way back to like 30,000 years BC.
Wow.
Neolithic goes back to about 10,000 BC to about 5,000 BC.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about, things that are long before written records were available.
Right. So, Kim, where are these digs taking place, and are they? How long does it take to decide where exactly to do a dig?
These sites are taking place in the Middle East, Turkey, Iraq, Iran, also in southern Europe, even other parts of Europe, Central Europe, Spain, parts of Spain, and going all the way east into Asia. Mm-hmm. So it covers a really wide area. Mm-hmm. And we think of early civilization as beginning in a small part, but actually it's very diffuse.
Yeah. And so if patriarchy did not always exist since the beginning of time, and I don't think a lot of people are really aware of that, what kind of society existed before patriarchy?
It's interesting because they didn't have any precedent, so they formed a society that just felt right and seemed to meet their needs. But now it's becoming more clear that it was a more equal gendered society, so that neither men or women ruled over the other. Riane Eisler likes to call it a partnership society, where both are working together in harmony and doing whatever is necessary in order to live their life in a meaningful and productive way.
Yeah. And so it seems on some level that we're attempting that again in modern times, where it seems to still be a little bit of a patriarchal society, but women today play a key role. Let's touch a little bit on that. Western culture, how does it compare to the world that existed before patriarchy?
Actually, there's no comparison.
Nah.
Yes, we like to think, that there's big changes taking place in our society, but still patriarchy rules. And once institutions are set up that favor men over women, it's very, very difficult to make changes.
Mm-hmm.
So in government, it's usually men who are leading. In religious institutions, it's usually men, and especially the Catholic Church, we still have the Pope. In economic, Wall Street is mostly governed by men. Corporations are mostly ruled by men. So we might like to think, that we are moving away from patriarchy, but believe me, it still plays a very important part of our life.
Mm-hmm. But even though we are patriarchal, there is a reverence to women in our culture. Goddesses, women are often referred to as that, and sometimes it's said that men enjoy viewing a woman, in that goddess role on a throne. He wants to serve her and be good to her and care for her. So how can those two live well among a modern civilization?
Yes, there are definitely changes taking place in our society, but they're also very regressive. There are also very regressive parts that have not changed at all.
Mm-hmm.
All we have to do is look at Congress, what's happening in Congress, and the fights over abortion, over
Right.
women's health. These are all things that are being decided by men.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a lot of things that have to be changed before women will really be free to be in control of their life.
Yeah, and have a voice that is truly heard and listened to. You mentioned something there. I wanted to touch a little bit about the abortion rights, or the right to life, rather. And it seems that there are a lot of men that are making those decisions because they are in those power positions. But when you hear of the atrocities that used to happen, it hasn't happened in a while, but outside abortion clinics, there were men that were murdering people. And they're the ones that, are sitting in that hierarchy making those decisions. So could you consider that a bit of a backlash?
It is a backlash, but also it's something that goes along with the idea that men are in control of women.
Mm.
These are ideas that men are not going to give up easily. And what we see in the women's life debates, this is just a continuation of the fact that men have the power to control women's life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, in the evangelical community, this is still part of their way of viewing the sexes. Women are supposed to be obedient to their husband. This is in the Bible. And anything else means going against the Bible. Mm-hmm. So that's why once something like this becomes institutionalized, it's very, very hard to break out of it, especially in the religious sphere. Because if you're saying anything different, it means you're going against the Word of God, and then you're subject to condemnation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good point. Which brings us back to the matriarchal societies that existed long before the birth of Christ. Tell us a little bit about that time, or what you know of that matriarchal society.
It began around 3000 BC, when the agricultural goddess cultures that were very prominent in Turkey and southern Europe became overrun by tribes from Asia, which were not agricultural but nomadic. They had large herds of animals. Mm-hmm. And they developed a society completely different, whereas the agricultural societies became goddess-centered and woman-centered. these nomadic Asian tribes developed very rigid patriarchal systems where man was considered to be powerful and rule over women, and it was also very militaristic. They believed that power was invested in them by being able to rule and to rule and to have conquest meant killing, and they had no problem with killing. And
So
they developed militaristic weapons that peaceful, loving, agricultural goddess cultures had no access to. They never even developed anything like this in all their history.
So when these two tribes came together, I mean, at some point they must have crossed paths. What happened?
They were completely wiped out. They were, especially in the Balkans, in Europe, there were waves, three major waves of these warring nomadic tribes that just came in and destroyed everything in their path because they had the military means to do it. And the peaceful agricultural communities had no way of defending themselves. And when they took over, the first thing they did was to institute their patriarchal system of ruling.
So this is where it began, more or less.
Yes, and in Turkey and Mesopotamia, which is mostly Iraq and Iran, it was more like a slow infiltration of these people, and they slowly acquired the means of ruling different areas and different cities, but it wasn't. It was a process that took several, at least 1,000 years.
Yeah.
And it went sort of back and forth. Sometimes women would be more in power and in charge, and then it would then revert again to male ruler.
So what kind of world do you think we'd be living in if it remained a matriarchal society?
Well, see, that's the problem. We like to speculate. If matriarchy in that society had been allowed to flourish and be with us today without being interrupted by patriarchal system, our world would be completely different from what it is now. We're, over the last 5,000 years, we've suffered wars and conflict and aggression. All these are products of the patriarchal structure. And none of this existed during the earlier societies that were goddess-centered. So we would be living in a much more peaceful, much more productive, much more happy civilization than what we have now.
It certainly is fascinating to speculate. We're going to take a short break, give a little pause to people's consciousness and give some thought to what we've been talking about. We'll take a short commercial break, and we'll come back and hear more from Kimberly Berg. I'm your host, Christine Larkin, and you're listening to Genesis Global Radio, the origin of information. We'll be right back after this short break.
Welcome and thank you for listening to Genesis Global Media Talk Radio. Genesis Global Media is an advertising agency and so much more. We put you on the map. That's right, Genesis Global Media is a branding machine. If you have a story to tell, we get the word out there. Radio shows nationally, television shows nationally, print, internet, search engine optimization, social media, you name it, we do it all. Our in-house staff provides you with everything you need from concept to finished product. Our state-of-the-art 10,000 square foot video production facility facility is out of this world. During these tough economic times, most ad agencies have closed their doors. Our doors just keep opening, with 10 new clients coming on board weekly. Stop on by our website at www.genesisglobalmedia.com or call us at 631-419-7344. If you have a business, a product, or need to get messaging out there to millions of people, we're your solution. Stop on by our website at genesisglobalmedia.com or call us at 631-419-7344. Are you stressed? Is your stress driving you crazy? Do you know there are many ways to relieve the stress? The Spirit Within Massage and Hypnosis Clinic does just that, reduce your stress plus so much more. Established in 1997, the Spirit Within Massage and Hypnosis Clinic offers an approach to wellness for those individuals who choose to either utilize appropriate complementary methods to enhance their current medical care, or to those individuals who are on their personal journey toward improved health and wellness through the use of therapeutic bodywork, Reiki energy healing, or hypnosis. The Spirit Within Massage and Hypnosis Clinic is owned by Dr. Judy Dean, a registered nurse and board-certified massage therapist and medical hypnotherapist in LaPorte, Indiana. Visit www.spiritwithinmassage-hypnosis.com to see all services offered by Dr. Judy. For a free personal consultation, please call Dr. Judy Dean at 219-326-1380. The Spirit Within Massage and Hypnosis Clinic, 219-326-1380.
And we are back. I'm your host, Christine Larkin. You're listening to Genesis Global Radio, the origin of information, with my very special guest today, Kimberly Berg. He's an incredible feminist artist. He has developed a website that just has magnificent works on it. You must go on and check it out, isisrising.net. That's www.isisrising.net. Go on there, check it out. And if you have any comments or want to purchase anything that's, there, or talk to Kim, you can email him at kdegas@artlover.com. That's KDEGAS at artlover.com. And again, that site is isisrising.net. So we talked a little bit about matriarchal versus patriarchal, when it all started, long before the birth of Christ, when it changed, how it changed. So where are we today? When you talk about the women's revolution in modern times, in the 20th century, where are we now? I mean, have we really made any strides in the last 40 to 50 years?
Yes, we have, but we've also experiencing now the backlash of what we've gained in the 60s. At least that's how I see it. All these questions about abortion and women's health, these are all reactions against what women had enjoyed in the 60s, where we had free sex, and these are all things that completely went against traditional ideas of what is right. Mm-hmm. And now, not only that, but the gay marriage thing, there's big changes taking place. And the interesting thing is the changes are being accepted by the general population before they're being accepted by the people that make these decisions in Congress.
Yeah.
And so there's a constant struggle back and forth going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly, from my perspective, I would agree with that very much so. You had the sexual revolution, and then women were out in droves in the job market. But then in the 80s, it was kind of like the power woman, raising a family, working. And then that didn't really work, because then, sort of in the 90s, end of the 90s, there was sort of this burnout that was going on. Then you go into the current times in the last decade, and you started to see a lot of women working from home. A lot of companies setting up places where they could bring their children, and there'd be people to watch them while they worked. So where there was an advancement, then there was sort of like, whoa, maybe we've taken on too much, and now sort of finding the middle ground in between the two. So, that being said, it seems to me that those more traditional roles are finding their way back. What do you think?
Yes, there's the problem is women want to be more in charge with their life, but the problem is how do you fit that in with their also the role of being mother and raising their children, and that's the reality that's starting to affect people's lives and how they're going to proceed from this point, because we need women in charge in managerial positions, not just lower rank positions, and that means really sacrificing a lot of your life just towards the demands of your career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But
go
I
ahead,
do
Kim.
see changes taking place.
Sure.
And I'm sure that one of the big changes is the women's study groups that have formed in almost every university now. Mm-hmm. This is making a big, big change in the younger population.
Yeah.
And I think in the future, we're going to see these people moving into areas that have been denied them in the past, especially politically.
I hope so.
Economically, too.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the women's studies courses. I know I took one when I was in my undergraduate studies, and it was such an eye-opener because until that point, I had never heard of a course like that. And we touched a bit upon, these matriarchal societies that existed. So, going into the future a bit, it's been said that we're evolving maybe into civilization 1, if we make it. That's like another level in our evolution. And so what do you think women, going into the future, what kind of role could we play in your wildest imagination? Give us a little insight.
Well, the way I see it, our present system is not sustainable. And there is going to have to be big changes, and I think women will move into areas that men no longer can play a leading role. Like the present collapse in Wall Street, made us realize that women in those positions are much more effective, much more efficient, and much more trustworthy than men who are just operating on the idea of making more money. And we see most of what happened, just plain greed. And we don't associate that kind of attitude with women. And the big difference between men and women is that when women are in positions like that, they're not thinking about how much money they can make. They're thinking about the future that they're creating for their children. Mm-hmm. And that makes a huge, huge difference.
But let's role play a little bit. What if women were in that position of power and it became so to the level that men have the power now? You don't think that greed would be a part of that, monetary greed?
I don't think so, because they're thinking more of their children. Men don't think about their children or their children's future. They just think about themselves. But I think women have traditionally always, whatever they do, it's always for the sake of their child or their children. Mm-hmm. And this has been a rule that has existed since the earliest times, even in Paleolithic times. All the advances that they made in their civilization can be attributed to their concern for their child.
Very interesting. Because of that pivotal ability to give birth, it's a different awareness.
Right.
So everybody listening today, if you want to go on Kim's site, there's just such incredible art. Kim, some of my favorite images are of pregnant women, that you got the birth mother. They're just so lovely. The site is www.isisrising.net. That's ISISRISING.net. And you can email Kim at kdegas@artlover.com. KDEGAS@artlover.com. Let's touch a little bit on your email address. Degas, that was a huge influence for you?
Yeah, well, most of my work is done in pastel, and Degas is the preeminent pastel artist. So by using his name, hoping that some of that might rub off in my own art.
And it has. It's so beautiful. So beautiful. So when you sit down to paint or, etch, what would you call it? Etching?
Well, for a pastel artist, you're painting.
Okay.
For a painter, you're drawing.
Okay.
So there's always that dichotomy there.
I was cleaning out some old boxes from a recent move, and I came across a bunch of pastels from when I took art classes. It was kind of neat. I forgot that I even had it. So, yeah, I used to love working in pastel, but it's been many, many years. But when you sit down and you start to paint, what comes in your mind? What is it different every time, or are you always driven by the adulation that you have for women?
It's not adulation, really. It's more a feeling of righting the balance, because I feel that women have been treated horribly by patriarchy, and I want them to have a good feeling about themselves and their body, which is being denied them through attitudes, created by patriarchal system. And this is something that's been going on for thousands of years.
Sure.
And what I can't understand, how this could have persisted for such a long time.
Not sure. Good question.
Yes.
And it continues.
I feel compelled to talk about it, Yet women can talk about it all their life, but it's not until a man talks about it that people start to listen.
So what do you think the one thing that women still face the most criticism about when they go out into the world, maybe walking down the street? What do you think is on a woman's mind?
Well, I'm not a woman, so it's not easy to answer a question like that. But I feel they just want to work with a level playing field.
Respect, mutual respect.
The whole idea is that women are inferior to men, and that's what women are fighting against now.
Yeah.
Trying to right the balance.
That's right.
And it's not easy.
And that's kind of winding our show down for today, Kim. It's been a pleasure as always.
Yes, I enjoy it very much myself.
Thank you, and we'll have you back for another segment. Thank you to all of our listeners. I'm your host, Christine Larkin. Thank you for tuning in to Genesis Global Radio.
For upcoming segments, log on to www.genesisglobalmedia.com and keep your finger on the pulse of the hottest brands on the planet.